Welcome. Let's give everybody a moment to go ahead and log on. And while we wait, I want to let you know that you can put in your questions in the Q&A box. And if we don't get to them today, we'll answer them in the follow-up. Also, everyone will receive a copy of this webinar. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the webinar, Making an Impact: How to Prioritize, Measure, and Maximize Your Philanthropic Effectiveness. I'm Alexis Fish, your moderator for today. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Foundation Source, and I come to you with a background of almost 2 decades in the philanthropic sector, focusing on solutions that maximize philanthropic impact through operational efficiency. Now, this time of year, we see some of the highest level of donations, communications, and time spent between donors and the organizations they support. Today, we're going to dig into what funders and advisors can do right now to make this year the most effective yet. Our expert panel will cover 3 topics: how to prioritize your philanthropic effectiveness goals, right? What does being effective really mean to you, and who can help you with this conversation? Then, how to measure your potential effectiveness, right? What is operational streamlining? And how does this impact your mission? And then finally, how to maximize your philanthropic effectiveness. What can good communications accomplish? I'm going to go ahead now and introduce our expert panel. Antoinette LeCouture is a veteran advisor in the corporate social impact and philanthropic space. As the co-founder of the consulting firm Create Impact, Antoinette works in the space between people and philanthropy to close the gap and enable individuals and organizations to realize their impact goals. Next, we have Cameron Marsh, who is a senior analyst with Nucleus Research, an independent evaluation firm that focuses on measuring the return on interest gained by thoughtful partnerships. And finally, we have Steve Aponte. He's the Vice President of Product and Strategy here at Foundation Source. His passion for building technology that solves problems spans beyond the philanthropic space and focuses on sharing information with a human-first lens. Thank you all for being here for our final national webinar of the year. We are deep into giving season now that Thanksgiving is behind us and the end of the year is straight ahead. Antoinette, we're going to start with you. Now, as the reports have shown us, this time of year, we see a huge increase in giving, both from individuals and foundations. One of the most popular questions that we see come up around this time of year is, how does someone decide who to give to?
Thanks, Alexis, and I'm really glad to be here. After being in the sector for decades, I have been asked that question so many times and almost every year. There are many ways to approach this. But first, I want to say that, creating an impactful strategy, one that's effective, really takes deep work. And for now, I would ask that if you or your clients are already giving, then to please honor those commitments this year, as the nonprofits are really counting on it. Let's assume that that's the case, or that you're just getting started with making a strategy. So we'll throw out the calendar and we'll talk a little bit more about steps that you can take, whether it's the end of this year or the beginning of next. One of the observations I have is that, many people give to causes that they feel connected to, or because someone asks them to. Social and emotional decisions are very common and very human. But that does mean that you can end up giving a lot of smaller gifts and feeling less of a sense of impact or commitment to the cause or the organizations that you fund. And the good news is that there is a way to align both your values, your philanthropy, and have a real impact. So the first step is, I would suggest, after finishing your gifts for the year, is that you actually take the time to take an inventory of that giving and consider why you gave. Were you asked? Did you know the organization, etc.? And then depending on your response, you may want to take a step back and really consider your values and how they align with your current giving. If appropriate, you may even talk to your family and include them in the decision making. Next, the question is, what do you want to have an impact on? that is a big one because there's a lot of ways to come at that exact same issue. One example is cancer, right? There's very few of us that will ever not have it in our lives in some way, whether we're directly touched by it or otherwise. And you want to have an impact, but you don't really know what that means. Example could be you want to help the people who currently have cancer, or perhaps you want to help the researchers find a cure or develop new therapies, or you want to support families who are directly impacted by cancer. Recently in the New York Times, there was an incredible story of how that can manifest. A young mother who unfortunately did get a diagnosis that was fatal posted on her social media about a week after she passed. And what she asked her friends and family to do in response to her passing was to give to an organization that eliminated medical debt. Didn't directly relate to cancer, but to her, she knew that the struggles and all families who have any kind of medical debt, it really can be crushing and it can be one of the most difficult aspects of having a fatal diagnosis. So for her, it was the way she knew she could connect. And the amazing part was it's an incredibly effective organization. It only does one thing and it does it really well. So $1 equals roughly $100 in relief of debt. So you can see that it was a tremendous impact and she was able to create a legacy even though she wasn't here. So getting to the heart of what it is that you want to have an impact on, and then aligning that to the charities and causes and organizations is part of that bigger strategy. So the next step would be to talk to your wealth advisor to make sure that you're using the best vehicle for your financial situation. And then they can also help guide you and connect you with perhaps a philanthropic advisor to select organizations and design a strategy that will help you realize your goals and honor your values. If you need more direction in that, again, starting with your wealth advisor is a great place to start, but philanthropic advisors and community foundations are also a good resource.
Good stuff. Thank you, Antoinette, for sharing your expertise with us and walking us through how people and organizations that want to make an impact can prioritize their philanthropic goals by first examining the kinds of giving that they're doing today, where they ultimately want their philanthropic giving to be, and the steps that they can take to get there. So this is a very helpful, although high-level view of the deep work that you've been doing for years, enabling philanthropists to successfully reach their goals. So with that idea of success, I'm going to move over to you, Cameron, with Nucleus Research to talk about measuring success and the results of the benefit study that you conducted. Cameron, can you start us off first by telling us about Nucleus Research?
Yeah, absolutely. Nucleus is an independent research firm that conducts analysis on organizations for the benefit of helping them understand and quantify the value of engaging in certain vendor relationships or other partnerships.
So that's right. When we speak of other partnerships, right? I was a fan of the work that Nucleus had done for years with a variety of different organizations, really not only because of the thoroughness of your research, but also because even when the results were less than favorable, they're always really helpful.
Exactly. Yeah, I think, insight is always going to have its own place, for the good or for the bad, right? So, as an analyst, the process we follow as a firm is pretty strict. We do work directly with a vendor's customers, and then we, give vendors that option to learn more about the study and about kind of what our findings were.
All right. So can you tell us more about the specific benefit study?
Yeah, absolutely. In this case, we spoke with a newer foundation. They were about a year and a half old, but despite being a fairly young foundation, they were already seeing benefits by working with you. There were a couple key takeaways that they focused on when partnering with you, and really, there were things that really all foundations should consider. So coming from the top, so first kind of setting the stage, right? What were some of the challenges that this foundation was experiencing before Foundation Source? So one of the first things, and probably the biggest thing, is it just had limited access to tools that were designed to organize and streamline documents and communication. Before Foundation Source, this foundation was using Google Docs, right? And as you can imagine, that means that there are documents all over the place, and the collaboration between one person and another, it was really difficult. And in addition, it was cumbersome, it was time consuming. And when you go to do those grant approval processes, if all your documents aren't all in the same place, that's going to take way longer than it should. It causes frustrations, and they recognize they needed a solution. In addition, inefficient donation tracking, application management, impact reporting, and for that new foundation, right? This was a smaller one, founded about a year and a half ago, but they're having difficulty in scaling their efforts and scaling their foundation. So the strategy, how did they achieve this? So, and you guys talked a little bit about this before, but high usability and adoption was key. In all research that Nucleus has done over the last couple of years, the thing that we've identified is the number one, killer of ROI is poor adoption, right? So in order to get the most value out of a solution, your people need to use it, right? So, and the next thing they were focusing on was data consolidation and visibility. Coming from a Google environment, they need to bring everything into one place, make it more streamlined and easier for everybody to, use on their daily basis. Last, automation. This is, one of those things that's pretty consistent across most technology, but all of the more cumbersome, the time-consuming aspects of managing a foundation, if you can kind of take some of that off someone's plate, it helps them kind of focus more on the more strategic decision making. Why Foundation Source? So this foundation did a full RFP process. They did a vendor search, and they chose Foundation Source. And after implementation, talking about some of the benefits, right? The foundation saw a 33% uptick in their ability to get grants funded out of the door because the Foundation Source services reduced the time spent on that administrative work. The foundation also saw a greater increase in trustee and board engagement after they started using our technology platform. This board, just to give context, is made up of folks that are mixed ages, both family members and trustees. So because all of these folks, all these board members have various degrees of technical expertise, they need a solution that was easy to use across the board, super intuitive. For some of their younger board members, the mobile application was a really big thing for them. But after they started using the platform, this foundation reported that everybody, and they stressed the word everybody, could vote on grants more easily, and all of the double entries and copying mistakes, we're all human, errors happen, but with Foundation Source, a lot of those human errors were effectively eliminated. Another thing I really want to touch on is compliance. And I know this is something that's going to be important, for a lot of newer foundations. It can be really overwhelming, right? To think about, we have to, that the mental strain of, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? And is it, up to code? But in this case, compliance was no longer an issue. Foundation Source's mix of both technology and services really enabled that, the lessened the burden of all those compliance concerns. This foundation opted to keep track of minimum distribution requirements, year-over-year compliance checks, and since your system does connect directly to the IRS master business file, and you have bespoke vetting, foundations are able to operate with the assurance that all aspects are up to code, and again, it removes some of that mental strain.
Well, very interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Cameron, do you think, especially because the foundation was so young, do you think that would apply to a more established foundation? I have some theories based on my own understanding of the tech that's out there, and of course my experience, but does size matter? Does age matter?
I think that's a great question. And honestly, I can't really speak too much of it from a data point of view because I would have to speak directly with that client that fits that profile. However, a key factor in this research was that the foundation, yes, was very small, but the staff they did have benefited greatly from how easy the technology was to use and from the services. And I think one thing I want to call is, usability is true regardless of foundation size, right? If it's going to be easy for a few folks, it'll be easy for a bigger range of folks. So when we talk about things like scalability, really that usability is a key aspect of an organization's ability to scale.
Antoinette, is that what you would expect or think of from an answer from your work with so many different corporations and folks who are philanthropists?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's a family of multiple generations trying to communicate and collaborate, the same is true inside a corporate foundation when you have members of the board all over the world, perhaps, as well as employees that speak a different language, even at the outset. Trying to collaborate and do their part of the process can be some of the most challenging. So communication is the key. And I would second the thing about compliance. Corporate foundations are often even more burdened in that they have both their corporate overlords as well as the government. And then again, they may have that international piece that's playing in to expand that need.
That's so interesting that you bring up the different languages and different people's needs as well. From a tech point of view, Steve, we have seen at least, and correct me if I'm not remembering this correctly, but that the platform and just the fact that it's readable by so many different people, right? Something that Cameron mentioned as well, all these different generations, is something that was really purpose built into this specific platform. Is that right?
Yeah, that's actually correct. You know, when we built Impactfully, we had compliance in the forefront of our minds. So then, you know, as users are making grants, for example, we will actually prevent them and stop them from making a compliance error. And so when they go to make a grant, let's say, for example, to a non-IRS approved charity, it will actually be stopped in the platform. And then our team will go on the back end, research it, contact the foundation, and then, you know, work with them to make sure that they're making the right decisions there. Because we know that, you know, compliance errors can be extremely costly. So we want to prevent them from doing that.
That's really nice, you know, sort of symbiotic relationship between services and technology and how they work together. Cameron, I'm going to get back to your slide so we can talk about market trends and touch more on the goodness that you found.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is true both, I think, for the foundation, this exact case study, but I also think this is kind of true from that broader market perspective. You know, across the board, scalability has been one of those, I guess, buzzword items this year. And I think one thing to call out in that is I think a lot of people, when they hear scalability, they picture from small to big, right? But I think what's important to call out is scalability also works in that opposite direction. You know, with increased volatility in the market, and things are changing all the time. I mean, technology 2 years ago compared to now is crazy, right? So for organizations, having the nimbleness is a word internet use that I like, but, you know, to be able to scale up as operations grow. And then, you know, in especially for foundations, right, that are maybe seasonal, right, be able to scale up operations and bring them back down, not have that latency between, you know, when the action needs to happen and when you're able to carry that out. And this, especially as organizations grow in size and sophistication, is a huge factor that comes into play. One of the other things I'm seeing a lot is consolidation. So using this case study as an example, you know, if you've got things all over the place, yeah, there are solutions out there that might have the ability to, you know, do all of them, but you want to be able to bring it all in one place. You know, make it easier for these managers and these board members to really just have the things they need to touch on a day-to-day basis at their fingertips. You know, you guys know this more than I do, but there are so many things, right, that go into managing a foundation. You know, you got administration, tax preparation, financial reporting, compliance monitoring. Being able to have a tool that can, I guess, encapsulate all of that in one place is insanely valuable. And the next thing is just taking advantage of purpose-built technology. And this is true for foundations, it's true for manufacturers, basically any organization operating within a very niche vertical. There's been a really noticeable and sizable uptick in demand for purpose-built solutions. The biggest reason for that is technology at this day and age is customizable. But for, in this case, a smaller foundation that maybe doesn't have the IT teams or doesn't have the resources to, I guess, retrofit that solution, if you have a solution that's out of box, it saves time, it saves money, it accelerates your implementation timelines, and ultimately it drives ROI. You know, and in addition to that, you know, the word adoption is last in that last bullet point, but I really can't stress enough how important that adoption factor is. You know, at Nucleus all the time, we say, you know, if people aren't using the solution, right, its value is zero, right? So in order to get the most value out of any platform, you have to actually use it.
That's a good point. Technology needs to be easily adaptable. I want to pull back from a moment. You've shared a lot of information with us. Antoinette, I'm wondering from your point of view, does some of the data and findings from what Cameron has seen resonate with you based on your own experience in the sector?
No, absolutely. I was nodding all along there, Cameron, with everything you were saying, because if your systems work for you, you're going to be able to be more accommodating to the accessibility or different needs of your nonprofit partners, and perhaps also strengthen their technology usage in the long run. I think it's also important to know that, as a wealth advisor, you're always going to have a tech stack, and your product needs to know what it is, know what it does, and stay in its lane. And nimbleness is the key to that. With stuff changing so quickly, there's a lot of older technology that's been used in this, and the process becomes so burdensome for everyone. It can't actually open up to being used in the most current version of tech, dare I say AI, in the process.
AI, that sort of elephant in the room that we'll touch upon a little bit. So Cameron, can you tell us a little bit more about your study?
Yeah, definitely. So I think in total, to summarize, what I found during the study was that foundations need a way to reduce third-party spending and administrative work. You just, Alexis, just said the word partnership, and that's one of the words I kind of want to call out, right? Because I think Foundation Source, more so than maybe some other customers I've talked to from other vendors, but they use the word partnership too, right? It's like you said, it's that symbiotic relationship between the technology and your partnership. It's that seasoned expertise. It's the, industry best practices. That is really, I guess, the key takeaway, right? It is the summation of all these benefits. They're greater than the sum of their parts, right? Services are amazing. Technology is great. Together, they're awesome, right? And I think, talking again to that reducing the administrative side of things, this foundation specifically had 1 full-time employee and 5 board members. So as you can imagine, that 1 full-time employee was wearing so many hats, right? So if the automations, if the, the recommendations from your expertise team helps her take some of those hats off, right? So she can focus on the things like, how do they make the biggest impact with their foundation? And that was really kind of the main story that, we were trying to tell here.
Thanks, Cameron. That's really interesting. We'll have to have you back on after you've done another study. And now that we've heard about the research and impact measurement work that Nucleus does, and we've learned about the impact that operational streamlining made for this foundation, like increasing their ability to get funds out the door while reducing their overhead costs, what a wonderful way to expand their grant-making capacity and potentially maximize their philanthropic impact. So with that idea of maximizing, we're now going to move over to Steve and examine maximizing effectiveness. So first of all, hi, Steve. See you.
Hello.
So we're going to talk today about maximizing philanthropic effectiveness. Okay, so as the Vice President of Product and Strategy here at Foundation Source, you have access to all different kinds of data and reporting that we publish here. With the idea of being able to sort of see that high-level view of the sector, we're going to start our conversation about effectiveness by looking at some of the findings from this year's Foundation Source report on private philanthropy.
Thanks, Alexis. Yeah, so, taking a high-level look and really understanding the data is a great way to start, right? So the report this year was interesting because it shows an increase in foundation giving. This is different than individual giving, which actually decreased. And what this tells me is that there is a greater focus on foundation giving and the role that foundations will have in supporting the nonprofit sector. One of the biggest differences we see between individual givers and foundation givers is the level of communication and direct interaction they have with the nonprofits they support. We're going to take a look at the important role that communication plays for a foundation to maximize its effectiveness. And we'll also look at 2 key areas of communication that a grant maker can focus on right now to maximize their philanthropic effectiveness. And so, communication takes on many forms during the philanthropic giving lifecycle, and it's easy for communication to get lost in the many different stages. When we talk about maximizing effectiveness, right, especially from a product and strategy point of view, we are able to break it down into specific areas where the technology and services work together to enable and enhance operational effectiveness. You heard from Cameron in the Nucleus case study that benefits were realized both from a technology and a services point of view. Our services team actually uses our product and technology to provide back-end support for our clients. You may have heard the term eat your own dog food. Well, that's exactly what we do. Our internal support teams leverage our technology and products to support these clients. And in other words, communications are extremely efficient and streamlined between both our internal staff and our clients. And our product is the enabler of those communications. My product team looks at the complete picture and focuses on making sure that our products and technology fit our clients' philanthropic needs rather than a foundation having to configure their process to fit into our technology. So for example, we have a feature called Impact Planning. And this feature allows for a foundation to see their giving in two ways. First, from the plan that they create together at the beginning of the year. And secondly, how they're tracking to that plan and whether or not their giving has diverted from that plan. And this is just one way that all foundation members can easily see their giving and the progress towards the foundation's goals. Another way that we keep communications flowing is with the built-in voting capability. And this feature allows trustees or the president, the board, the CFO, or any other assigned member to easily review and grant requests and submit their vote. And while also providing commentary as to why they approve or even may reject a grant submission. And that cross dialogue between foundation members is really important as they're going through the granting process. Our platform also has the ability for foundations to communicate directly with their charities and grantees. And so we provide this capability through a grantee portal that we call the Giving Hub. And all of these flexible tools and supportive white glove services allow for donors to break through that administrative noise and maximize their effectiveness. Typically, when an individual or a family comes to Foundation Source to create their foundation, or they'll come to us to help with their existing foundation. And as soon as they onboard with us, they quickly realize how easy it is to streamline all of their vendor engagements, because Foundation Source handles everything from incorporation to creating users on the platform and to assisting them in all aspects of their philanthropic journey. Just about all these foundations have goals of effectively engaging their family members in their philanthropy. And oftentimes, these family members live a pretty good distance away from each other and are maybe even spread out across the country. So by centralizing their giving on one platform, they can now engage in shared experiences. For example, like creating a mission statement together, or creating a grant application process, tracking their granting activity against their impact plans, and so much more. Two key types of communications you could practice right now are one, with the nonprofit you want to support, right? If there is an area that you're interested in, you should reach out and set up a time to ask questions, learn more about their mission, and see if it aligns with yours. And secondly, create a space or a forum to speak with the people that partner with you in your giving. This could be a family member, a wealth advisor, a clergy member, or even a friend, right? Talk with them about the areas that you want to impact. So to bring these two communication tips to life, let's look at a result from this year's report of the breakdown of different sectors that received philanthropic giving. The first thing that you'll notice is the giving percentages rising and falling from one year to the next. So using this data can help you plan conversations with your nonprofits that you want to support. As a result of those conversations, it can help you direct your giving where they need it. And using this kind of data can help further inform your decision making. Another interesting thing that stands out is that not all areas are defined, right? Even with conversations, looking at your own individual giving through this lens can be helpful and can enhance your current conversations with nonprofits. And so this kind of high level data is something that every foundation can put their own giving up against, especially in a year-over-year comparison. And pulling out this high-level view of your foundation and matching it to your giving goals is just one tool you can use in your communications with your trustees, or even just around the table with your family, and it will for sure help you and inform you in your giving for the rest of the year. And this idea really brings us full circle back with Antoinette's first suggestion.
Thank you, Steve. You're right. This does bring us back full circle. And thank you for walking us through exactly how to implement and how the technology and services and foundation source can make everything happen that we've heard today, right? Part of it is being able to be action oriented. So like you said, setting those goals is a concrete step you can take today.
Yeah, that's right. And this is true for organizations of all sizes and individuals who want to be more efficient in their giving while increasing their impact. Our products at Foundation Source are ever evolving, and at the center of that evolution is our company's goal to make giving easier with innovative technology that is backed by philanthropic expertise. New foundations often are figuring out their communications and their overall workflow, while existing foundations have established certain processes but need a way to scale, become more efficient, and engage foundation members.
Thank you, Steve. That insider's look into Foundation Source and the product goals is very helpful, especially when coupled with those benefits we heard from Cameron and the best practices that we heard about from Antoinette. So with that, we have some questions. I'm going to go ahead and start us off with the first question here. What do you see as being giving trends for 2024? So Antoinette, I start with you, and then perhaps Steve, you go next. Cameron?
Yeah, first, I just want to echo Steve. I really appreciate the focus on the communications, both the transparency for all the different parts of that puzzle, whether it's family to family, trustee to nonprofit, and even just staff to staff. That is a key component because it's where a lot of the waste happens, is the miscommunications and then the redundancy. So I really think that's worth highlighting again. With that in mind, one of the biggest trends that I'm seeing, especially because I'm out here in California, is that a lot of the philanthropic energy coming out of the tech sector is to actually fund and create nonprofits that are built on the same business models that they are. In that they're sort of startup, nimble, hyper-focused on solving an individual problem, and they're using tech and data to actually get that problem solved. And their goal is not to be around forever. Their goal is to solve the problem and get out. And the fun part about that as a funder is that you can fold that kind of efficiency and effectiveness and really see an impact in a short period of time, and balance that against some of the more social or heartfelt issues, because efficiency is what's keeping us from getting some of these problems solved. And the nonprofit sector is not necessarily meant to always be a behemoth that lasts forever.
Really great
Steve,
points.
what do you think?
Sorry. Yeah, no, really great points, Antoinette. And I appreciate that comment, about having the entrepreneurial mindset in the nonprofit. And I think that's where Foundation Source really shines, because we truly want our clients to focus just on the giving, to really focus on that impact, and we take care of everything else. And, we see all kinds of different givers, right, in our portfolio. And we also speak frequently with advisors and those who support these givers. And, my product teams are super focused on customer needs and creating customer-centric products. We want to meet givers where they are and give them the tools that makes their giving easier. We are constantly looking at ways that technology can alleviate any of the administrative work, both for the philanthropists and the nonprofits that they support. And specific tools and functionality we're looking to build include not only automation, but also looking at how we can use data that already exists to close efficiency gaps in both the grant making and the fundraising process. And, we talked about this briefly earlier in the presentation. One of the biggest trends across all industries right now is AI, right? Artificial intelligence. And, from a product perspective, my team is constantly thinking about how AI can be used to enhance the experience with our products and accomplishing that goal of making giving easier. And so there's a lot of research and testing that's going to happen in 2024. And, this is something that we like to call innovating responsibly.
Love it.
It'll be exciting to see what comes out. But AI
It definitely will be. I think to kind of echo what they were saying, one of the, I guess, forward-looking trends that I'm seeing from like the analyst perspective is that it doesn't really make a difference how many offerings or products a vendor has, but rather the relationship they're able to build with their clients, right? Their customers. You guys talked a lot about how, Foundation Source has been able to achieve, right, that symbiotic relationship between the services and the technology. But that isn't possible if the relationship isn't there. Right, I got a chance to actually talk to a couple more of your customers, and all of them kind of echo the same thing. Your customer success managers are great. They know them by name. When you guys are at conferences together, you go and say hi, right? It is an actual partnership. There's a real relationship there, and that's not easy to find between a lot of vendors and their customers. Even though, bring us back to this exact case study we're working on. This foundation, although yes, they accepted online applications for grants, but, while using the services from Foundation Source and their own outreach, again, it's that partnership, right? It's leveraging, what they do well and what you guys do well too, to, elevate, right, the entire, I guess, total impact of that foundation. Knowing the overall organization is always going to help you understand, are the dollars that they're getting from these donors, are they going to a good cause? Are they being used effectively? Another thing that we saw foundations doing was streamlining the amount of documents required instead of just giving nonprofit organizations the flexibility to submit reports designed by the nonprofits rather than the foundations, right? So it's not just about, hey, we're going to hold your hand through this process, but in a lot of cases, we're going to actually do it for you, right? Let us do what we do well. You focus on making the biggest impact that you can for your foundation.
I think there's a lot of common themes there, and Antoinette, you may be seeing this in the larger sector in general, just in terms of understanding that we need the data, but how can that data be collected and aggregated in a way that doesn't create an additional burden?
Right. No, I absolutely agree with that. And I would also add that it's also collect that which you need. Ask yourself whether or not what you're collecting is actually something you're going to take action with. And the beauty of streamlining, back to Steve's earlier point of the fact that if you use the family foundation as the model and you have multiple generations, different people, different resources, but that is a large foundation who has multiple funds, right? It's the same concept. And so everybody being able to share the data actually lessens probably the unnecessary collection of data and the unnecessary burden that you're putting on the nonprofits. It also keeps it equitable and ethical, quite frankly. The ability to access data that's already exists in the public sector in various forms is one of the other things that a tool like this gives you, right? So you're not asking the nonprofit repeatedly for the same information they've already provided. And being able to act on that across the board and review it on a regular basis. I love that, is that you can actually look at where you're at different points in a year instead of only doing it, annually after the fact.
That's a great point that you bring up in terms of, how do they know how they're doing, right? How do funders? And so I'm gonna, with that, move to a second question here. Cameron, I guess we'll start with you on this one. This question says, I already know where I want to give. What is the best way, right, to find out if my money was put to good use? And I love the points that were touched on in terms of using the data that is already available. As the data guy here, Cameron, are you seeing this kind of thing in your research? And maybe then we move on to Steve and Antoinette to talk about some trends in here. But from a data point of view, how are you seeing this play out?
Yeah, so I think In relation to this, transparency is always going to be the thing that customers want most, right? And that's true across all organizations, all verticals, right? It's building that sense of trust, right? In this example, in the foundation world, people, like you guys have all echoed, people give to things that they care about, right? And they want to be able to trust the foundation they're giving to then kind of carry out what they want done, what kind of makes them tick, right? So, the transparency in, here's where this money is going, here's the impact that it's having. It makes it a lot easier, and this is twofold, makes it easier for, the donors to be willing to give it, right? And then it also increases the amount of gifts that you're giving, right? So I think that, as people feel comfortable, right, with the efforts they're making, and then the efforts that you're then carrying out, it's going to make that relationship even stronger. So I think the transparency is really the number one thing that I've seen.
Interesting. Steve, what about you in terms of how would they know the best way to sort of find out if their money was put to good use or feel good about it, I guess?
Yeah, we hear this question a lot from our existing clients and even prospects, because, measuring impact is so important to a foundation. One of the best ways to set expectations and make sure that grants are being used effectively is getting to know an organization up front and then keeping the communication lines opened throughout the relationship. So from a product and a technology point of view, there are a few features in our platform that helps with this process. For example, we have one feature called Outcomes. This gives a foundation the ability to build essentially an impact analysis form that can then be sent digitally to the charity. And our private client advisors actually play a key role in helping foundations ask the right questions of the charity in that form. And then the charity in turn comes into our platform, completes all of the questions in the form, and sends it back to the foundation where foundation members can assess the impact of their giving. And this type of communication is just one of many ways in our platform that promotes healthy dialogue between the foundation and the charities they support. And this is just one small example of how both our technology and our people service our clients.
Steve, I really like that, because a healthy dialogue, but also an informed dialogue. So much of the myth busting that needs to happen is this fact that a nonprofit might function very differently than a for-profit, or that your investment strategy with your wealth is different than your philanthropic strategy, when in truth, it's a strategy and it needs to constantly be looking at itself and being informed. And by having an open dialogue with your nonprofit, it can really help you to understand better why the costs are the costs and where your dollar might be best invested. And it might not be in that program. It might be in technology or operations efficiency for the nonprofit itself to actually get to doing the work that it does. So I love that.
And that is a good point in terms of asking them, right? What are my goals? And aligning with those. We have a few more questions, but I'm going to go ahead and we are going to look at the tips that some takeaways from today, and any unanswered questions we will follow up with an email. So I'll go through the tips and then ask each of you if you have any closing thoughts. So the first tip to leave you all with in terms of an action item for today really is that reach out to your wealth advisor, right? If you have one, or whoever your giving partner might be, if you need that, sort of mirror up to your giving, you're looking for direction. And then of course, if the wealth advisor has questions, there are experts that, you can help with. And then, understanding your pain points by examining really those benefits that you want. What is keeping, your ultimate giving from happening currently? And, then we can sort out really how to have you do that. Just as the example that Antoinette gave with the New York Times article, there could be so many different areas to give in, and what is really the root cause of what you're looking to do and help solve. And then you could also look at what portions of communications, right, are using those sort of specific parts of the tools that you already have or communications that might be creating more waste or a backlog of things. How can we streamline those? Antoinette, I'm going to start with you. Any final thoughts or tips for our Q4 audience today?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to anybody who's on here for your generosity, and to remember that giving is a gift. The privilege and the opportunity to do so should be at the heart of the why. There's a lot of strategy. We talked a lot about work, and we talked about communications and responsibility. But hopefully it's also an opportunity to be inspired and make connections either with your community and your family or your friends or the larger society as a whole, and really feel an impact of the opportunity that you have by being a giver.
Cameron, go on to you.
So listening to all of you guys talk about it, I think, the number one thing that came to my mind was, that saying of the enemy of change is inaction, right? So in order to, I guess, make a difference, it's just that, it's action. I heard you guys talk about, if you have questions, ask. There's no, I guess the barrier to entry, right, for someone wanting to make a difference, I think is oftentimes a lot lower than they think it is, right? So you can just reach out. There are folks that are in the positions that they're in, right, to, I guess, help facilitate what you want to see happen, right? So I think just being able to, I guess, first of all, identify those folks, reach out to them. I think in a lot of cases it's a lot less scary and something people think it is. So the first step is just to start, right?
And Steve, we'll finish off with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the points made today. It was such a great conversation. But being the technologist that I am, I'll close out with a technology tip. And I'll just say that, from the beginning of time, right, technology was built to be an enabler. And that's what tech should do for you in your giving, right? And, this goes for any technology that you might be using, right? It should streamline your process. It should help you be more efficient. And most importantly, it should help you focus more on the giving and less on the administration piece of it. And hopefully today you've learned a little bit about how to do that through different platforms.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists for today. Thank you to everybody who joined us on our webinar. We, of course, invite you to check out the specific resources mentioned during this webinar. We thank you for your time. And again, we'll respond to unanswered questions through email, and everybody will receive a recording of the webinar as well.